Welcome to the NEF Capital Advisors Executive Insights webcast. Today's topic is the shift toward edge data centers. And I'm joined by Mike Murphy, President at NEF. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Joy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent.
Mike, today I'd love to just explore with you a shift that we're seeing going on in data centers, and that's what's taking this data center development closer to the edge of the network.
It really comes down to one thing, Joy. It comes down to content. And I think the best way to explain technology is usually real-world examples. And so maybe about a year or so ago, House of Cards, which is a pretty popular Netflix original series, and debuted a new season. And the way they do that is they actually list all 12 episodes, whatever it is, at once. And when they did that, they actually broke the internet. So if you kind of look at Netflix as a driver to some of this edge data center trend, it's really about 40% of the traffic now in North America in the evenings is Netflix traffic. Not just streaming video, but Netflix traffic. So Netflix releases this new series. It's wildly popular. Everyone starts downloading the series because they want to binge watch all the episodes. And literally it caused bottlenecks all over the internet for an entire weekend and a couple of days after that. And really what's going on there is that content, most of it, is housed in major data centers in a couple of parts of the country. So all the requests were going back across, traversing across the internet to these major data centers, and the content was distributed there. So it's a largely inefficient way to deliver that content. And what we're starting to see now is that folks like Netflix want to put that content a lot closer to the user. So if you're in Des Moines and you want to download House of Cards, you're not going all the way back to Ashburn, Virginia, where there's a major point of presence, and then hauling that content all the way back to Des Moines through the internet. You're actually going to hit servers somewhere in Des Moines.
So talk to me about potentially the difference between the traditional CDN and the local IX as it relates to this.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap, I think, and CDN was this idea of moving mostly static content to servers that were closer to the end user, and you use the cache function, and CDNs have modified over the years, and they've changed, become more dynamic. The idea of a local exchange, though, is that as opposed to internet traffic, if you think back to the beginning of the internet, there was two places where major carriers would change traffic. So if I'm a Verizon customer and you're a Comcast customer, and we're sending each other email, or we're streaming video or something, at some point that connection has to be made so that I can bridge from the network that I'm on to the network that my receiver is on, the person that I'm sending information to. And so therefore, these major internet exchanges, there was only two in the country, May East and May West. As time has gone on, there's maybe 10 or 12 in the U.S., and most of the internet traffic was exchanged in those areas. The idea behind local exchange is that you don't have to backhaul traffic to these major exchange points. You can do it right in the metropolitan area. So at that point, it's much more efficient. You're not using this international or national backbone. You're absolutely just exchanging the traffic there. And the idea behind local exchange is it's very open. You put a piece of hardware in, usually a carrier-neutral site. Everyone brings their network in, and when I have traffic for Comcast and I'm Verizon, and that traffic is local, I'll exchange it locally.
Great. So if we think about how this affects Des Moines or any of the other smaller markets as opposed to the big data center markets, what does this mean for data centers in those areas?
Well, data centers that don't exist in those areas are being built. The ones that are in those areas become more valuable. And what we've seen is a trend that what they call brown space. So it's not greenfield, but it's an existing building that maybe has some key network infrastructure in it already, and is now going to become a landing site for some of these content providers, now are become more valuable because it's got a new use profile and a very aggressive customer base now that's saying I need to deploy more services in areas closer to my end users. So we're seeing more data center development in Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4 markets than we are in the NFL cities, where the NFL cities are where a lot of the internet exchange points were. So you saw the data center development clustered around those exchange points because that's where the content guys wanted to be and a lot of the big data center users. Now we're starting to see that move out. One of the challenges, though, with the smaller markets is they typically don't have a clearly identified carrier hotel. And so, where is this traffic being exchanged? How is it being exchanged? Where do the carriers end up delivering service to? That's why these buildings that have a lot of network in them already but aren't positioned as data centers can easily be repositioned as a data center, and then the content providers or data center developer will come in and upgrade the power, the cooling, all of the infrastructure within the building to turn it into a data center.
So that begs the question, I think, for data center owners and those who are contemplating data centers closer to the edge. And how do you see this playing out?
Well, I think as time goes on, we're going to see more of a distributed architecture. You can continue to upgrade all of the backbone connections within the internet, but you're still going to have a latency issue, and latency really deals with the amount of time it takes for a packet of information to go from its origination point all the way out to its destination and back again. It just takes time. And so when you start to look at HD video and a lot of these other things, latency is a big issue because you'll start to see buffering and you'll see things that are skipping, and really it's just because it takes the packets that much time to get from where that source is back to the destination. So I think as more and more things become internet-based, and things like 4K video and everything else is just going to continue to put more and more strain on the network. I think it really needs to be distributed in order to be efficient and keep up with the growth that we're seeing in the bandwidth demand.
Are you seeing active buyers in this market that are out there looking for these data centers that are already built and actively looking for acquisition targets? Are you having those conversations?
We are. Today the number of folks that we have that are interested in buying these locations or developing these Tier 2, 3, 4 market data centers far exceeds the amount of inventory that we can find. So it's been a good situation. It's definitely a seller's market. But at the same time, it's challenging because there's not enough inventory right now.
Would you say that those data centers in those smaller markets need to hit a certain set of numbers in order to be attractive targets, or because the demand is so high and the supply is low, they really don't have to have what you might call a perfect profile to sell right now?
They don't, and I think the dynamics have changed, the multiples have changed a bit, specific to these, data centers that fill in gaps in the content provider's network and distribution. And this is kind of a new frontier where they're saying, okay, I'm going to move the stuff out of these centralized internet pop cities and I'm going to put it closer to the end user, so I've got to find a landing spot in a whole bunch of cities in pretty short order. So there's a few things that we see that I think are key criteria. If it's just a real estate play and it's a data center developer that's going to come in and say, I'm going to create a data center, then they're looking at buildings that have a lot of fiber-based infrastructure in it. So a lot of the fiber providers have brought facilities in. Typically, it'll be a POP location for some of the carriers. So it's not really a carrier hotel. It's just where some of the telecommunications providers have set up their their gear and deliver service out of that location. And they're good long-term tenants, and they are able to provide service and help the ecosystem and all that great stuff. As you get further up the stack and you have a data center that's already built out inside this building, it's probably more about access to fiber and network and distribution networks locally than it is necessarily about some of the services that they may offer or exactly how profitable they are.
Great. Well, this has been really helpful. Thank you so much. And we just look forward to the next webcast from NEF Capital Advisors. And thanks, Mike, again. And we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you, Joy.